Every Wednesday morning at this time, we check in with our friends at the Blacklocks Reporter. They are minding Ottawa's business in the only reporter-owned and operated newsroom covering our nation's capital. You'll find them online, blacklocks.ca, well worth your subscription. Tom Korski is the managing editor there who joins us for these weekly chats. Tom, good morning.
Morning, Mike.
It seems as though Laurie Idlout has awakened some frustration within Canadians when it comes to floor crossers.
Petition in the Commons signed by more than 53,000 people. That's a lot by Canadian standards. MPs sponsor petitions all the time. This was a petition sponsored by a Conservative MP, Leanne Rood. And it said that the Parliament of Canada Act should be changed so that anyone who crosses the floor to join another party, therefore altering the makeup of Parliament, should have to face their electors in a by-election instantly. Interestingly, this was the subject of an NDP bill 3 years ago, never passed, Mike. But here we see 53,000 people signing on, given the 4 defections from the Conservative and New Democrat caucus to the Liberal caucus. I know you've talked about this in the past. Those by-elections in April 13th, in 3 ridings, won by Liberals, albeit one in the Montreal suburb Terrebonne was a close shave, but 3 wins last year. At least 2 of those are pretty safe Liberal seats, and they're through floor crossing. The Prime Minister gets his technical majority, and the petitioners are just outraged, Mike.
A by-election shouldn't be too much to ask, Tom. Come on.
No, in fact, there was an old 19th century rules that involved even ethics violations. Our founding Prime Minister, John A. Macdonald, had a scrape on ballot stuffing at a tavern in Kingston, and his seat was vacated, only party leader to undergo this, and he had to face his electors in Kingston. But the people are never wrong. And in this case, you have the implication is, I don't want to use rough language, Mike, but there was some sleazy deal cutting in the back room to get these floor crossers. And now the Prime Minister, presumably after by-election day, will have all the cards.
It's interesting that the NDP tried recently, you mentioned it 3 years ago, to step in and stop this practice of floor crossing. And it's the NDP that Ms. Idlout is leaving after, by the way, endorsing Avi Lewis as the next leader of the federal NDP. It sounds like Avi Lewis's campaign is resonating. More than $1 million raised on the pledge to tax the rich.
That's interesting, isn't it? They're going into final balloting now. New Democrats elect the leader on March 29th. Someone might say, what's first prize? Because right now the party's down to 6 seats in the House of Commons. They've never had fewer seats, going all the way back to the predecessor in 1935, Cooperative Commonwealth Federation. 6 seats is slim pickings. But here we see Avi Lewis, Vancouver activist, has raised in going into final balloting $1.2 million, more than all his rivals combined. He doesn't have a seat in Parliament. One leadership rival does, Heather McPherson, Edmonton Strathcona. He doubled her fundraising. $1.2 million by NDP standards, that's a lot of money. And we have to say, Mike, most of those were donations under $100. He got over 10,000 contributors to his campaign.
That's some grassroots work there.
It is, and he's been working it even in Ottawa when he had his rally. That where his words, not mine. The great Laurie Idlout came out to endorse his campaign just 20 minutes before she left the party. He got 800 people out on a winter night here in Lumbertown. Not too bad.
Not too bad. And listen, we can go to the Conservative Christmas party one night and the Liberal Christmas party the next. That's what floor crossing does these days.
It has happened. That's true.
Okay, we've been talking about this one already this morning, Tom, on the show, but the feds are not letting go of this ruling on the use of the Emergencies Act several years ago, all the way now to the Supreme Court. Our federal government will appeal.
It's going to be interesting. I think it's a given the Supreme Court will take the case. They don't have to. It would be odd if they sidestep this one. But the implication for the court is unattractive because the Chief Justice had opined on his low opinion of the protesters in an interview with a Quebec newspaper at the time. He described them as anarchists. And he described the protest as an outbreak of anarchy on the streets of Ottawa. There were some trucks parked outside the Supreme Court building. That's a little rough, Mike. You can't have judges, even in police court. You remember when we were police court reporters, it was unheard of to have a judge, forgive me, shooting his mouth off to a newspaper reporter about a plaintiff or a defendant who's going to wind up in his court. We have to at least fake impartiality. I think by taking this case, the court puts itself in a real tough spot. And the implication is they have to give it to the protesters. What would the reaction be if you're going to be the Zaire of the G7? You're going to have a Supreme Court Chief Justice shoot his mouth off about expressing his low opinion of a plaintiff or defendant in a court proceeding, and then go ahead and rule against that plaintiff or defendant? It's unbelievable.
Faking impartiality, at minimum. That's all we could ask for. Several, though. That's what brings up calls that we hear from time to time, Tom, about electing judges as opposed to appointing.
You know what? It's not. I'm with them. I'll tell you why. I say this as a reporter. I say this as someone who's been involved in civil proceedings, all very strict in business, commercial business. Anyone who thinks judges are impartial, the honest ones will tell you, of course not. They'll try to be fair. What's the difference between us and the United States? Except that their partiality is right out there for everybody to see at election time. Does anyone really think, this happened, by the way, that Attorney General Dave Lametti, when he appoints a campaign contributor as a Liberal-appointed judge in Quebec's Superior Court, that judge will be, air quotes, impartial if there's a Liberal Party defendant or plaintiff in his court? Come on. The Americans, we think we're superior, but they just talk about it in the town square. We talk about it behind closed doors.
All right. This story at blacklocks.ca really caught my attention, Tom. Our economy here in Canada is so poor, it represents a human rights crisis?
Says the Human Rights Commission. Mike, it is the darndest report I have ever read, in particular from that group. They say that the fundamental human right to an adequate standard of living is at risk. I quote them accurately. They point to housing shortages. They point to the rising poverty rates, and poverty rates are up, and the cost of groceries that has generated food insecurity. They describe it as alarming. They say it is now a cost of living crisis, which at its core is a human rights crisis, end of quote. One number to watch, Michael. Approximately 4 million Canadians live in poverty. This is a mathematical calculation based on the portion of your income that must go to food and shelter. This is the payoff. Many more people, by StatsCan's estimate, 10 million people in our country are working poor. In other words, they live in households reporting some form of food insecurity. You are avoiding paying bills so you can feed the kids. 10 million people. That's a dark, dark number.
It is. And again, the reminder, this is still Canada, right?
It's something, isn't it?
It is.
Honestly, Mike, we've got $100 trillion of resources sitting in the ground. I'm not making a speech. You say, how is it possible that we don't have the workers' paradise? You remember in the 70s and 80s, we used to talk about Canada's unfulfilled potential. That was our great burden. And now we're talking about whether you can go to the grocery store on Friday. Unbelievable.
All right, one more before I let you go, Tom, because it really caught my attention. $4 million a year to work from home for the federal civil servants, eh?
Why would it cost anything, a taxpayer might ask? Well, sir, they're not going to work off kitchen stools. They were supplied with office chairs, laptops, printer supplies, office supplies, other equipment, internet dial-up fees, over $4 million a year to send 250,000 public servants to work from home. In one of the cases, we see Treasury Board spent over $500,000 on computer equipment for staff. So now they want to get them all back in these half-empty office buildings that you've also been paying to heat and cool since the pandemic. So if you're John Q. Sucker taxpayer, you're getting it coming and going, Mike.
I'm feeling more like a John Q. Sucker every day, Tom. Every day. Appreciate the work you do. Thanks for the chat.
Thank you, Mike.
Tom Korski, managing editor at the Blacklocks Reporter, the only reporter-owned and operated newsroom covering our nation's capital. You'll find a subscription waiting for you at blacklocks.ca, and that's just a little bit of what you'll find at blacklocks.ca when you do subscribe. Tom Korski joins us every Wednesday morning at 10, minding Ottawa's business here on The Mike Farwell Show.